Hey there, this is Chad from Zombie Fight Shark. Welcome to another installment of our beginner series with Reason. And in this episode, we're going to talk about using loops in Reason, which is a lot easier than it used to be. If you've been around a while and used Reason for a while, you know that using loops wasn't always the simplest thing in the world. So we're going to look at a couple of ways to use loops, and easy ways, hard ways. It's might be a little bit intimidating at first, but hang in there and you're going to get it. So first, I want to just play a little brief track here. Don't have any loops going. I have some, you see I have a Rex there. Technically loop, but different instrument. That's not what we're talking about this time. Where I just put a couple of Bomb Squad beats together. Sounds a little something like this. Okay, so pretty awesome. I know, put it on wax, make a record, make $1 million. So I want to use a loop with it, right? So I've got this one that I picked out, but you see it's in C minor. That's that C and the little M means C minor. And the thing that I've written here, my little groove, is in E minor. It doesn't work terribly, actually, just so you can hear what it sounds like without changing anything. Sorry if that blew you away. And obviously it's a little short, so it doesn't loop perfectly because it's a different tempo. I have 120, that's 128. I can speed my stuff up. There's a couple ways to fix that, but we're going to say in this case we don't want to change the tempo. So what do we do next? Now, let's say we are fine with this E minor and C minor. Technically, they're not really that related, but it doesn't matter. There's no rules. So how do we just want to make that loop better, right? And we're almost there. You can see that it's actually quite close. So it's very close to being a perfect loop. And so if I hover over here, you can stretch it, but what does that do for me? It doesn't do nothing for me. And if I go here, you see this, make sure this is important, disable stretch. You don't have to do anything to enable it initially. And then I'm gonna hold control on my keyboard while I've got that highlighted, hover over a little arrow and you see a clock pops up, click and drag, and it's going to pop itself to the next section there, the next line, however you've got your grid set up. And then it should fit. Sounds like this. Pretty dope, right? Okay, so now we've figured out, well, maybe I want it to be an E minor because C minor and E minor aren't really related. Maybe I want to stick to my key. So what do I do now? Well, assuming you have a recent enough version of Reason, then one way to do it, this isn't the only way, is you can go to Grain Sample Manipulator. You hit F6 is the shortcut key to flip over to the rack, and we're going to reset Grain here. So I right click on it, go down to reset device, bloop, reset, nothing there, right? All right, so now let's go to our sample. There's my sample, and I'm going to click and drag right here, and I dropped it on in. Now you'll see it's not highlighting. If you haven't, I have a Grain series you can go check out if you don't know anything about Grain, but you can see it's only highlighting a small portion, and we want it to play the full loop right here. So I'm stretching it all the way out so it's going to play the full loop. And then do I want it to be a one shot? Do I want it to be loop? We'll leave that the way it is right now. It's fine if it's looping for these purposes. But now when I go to my keyboard, I can play this loop. So now if we go back to here, and let's see what happens if we just play that loop. Now it's not going to be perfectly in time, so I'll get to that in a second, but I better give myself some runway. So there it is. It was not quite in time, but it was in key. So if I continue using Grain and I want to make it in time and in key, then one way to do that, again, there's always multiple ways to do stuff, or almost always, where I had dropped the loop in here and stretched it, check it. What we're going to do, we're going to bounce clips to new samples, and you see it bounced it to this. See this all self-contained sample does that automatically. Bodacious, right? Okay, so now I'm gonna go back to here. I'm gonna take my sample I just bounced, I'm gonna drop that bad boy in, and it's gonna sound a little bit different here because we've processed it some. So you can hear some of those, some of the jitters, sampley, you know, it's messed with it just a little bit. But let's hear it in the context of our breakbeat. So, you know, there we go. Now, the next section, let's say I wanted to keep using that bass line and not have to go, I don't have to go through all that stuff again if I've already done the steps that we just did. If I'm using it in Grain, all I have to do is play an A on the keyboard. And, you know, as you go up and down, after you start playing with these samples, they can start sounding weird. But anyways, it goes a little something like this. So there you go. You get an idea there. That's, again, one way to do it with using Grain. So those are the more modern tools. All right, so still using that same sample we had from before. Let's say you don't want to use Grain, or you want to use just something different that you feel like is easier for you to use, for whatever reason, doesn't matter. Another way to do the same thing. We're going to go to Instruments. We're going to Built-in Devices, Dr. Octo Rex. And we're going to play it as a Rex loop. Now, how do you make this wave into a Rex loop? You might have noticed this before. When you go to bounce clip to Rex loop is grayed out. I've never understood why, but you have to double click on that, and it shows all of your samples, all of your pieces. And these are all movable, and depending on what you want to do with the loop, once you've imported it into Dr. Rex, then Dr. Octo Rex, excuse me, there's 8 of them, then you can play with these the way it's split up. That's more advanced. We're not going to worry about that right now. We're going to go with what they gave us. And now when you right click and you go to bounce, magically bounce clip to Rex loop works. So boom, we bounced it to Rex loop. And if you get lost and you can't find where, like, you know, you clicked on something else and you're just like, where was I? Song samples is where you want to go for your loops and stuff that you've bounced. So now let's go back. Let's go to our rack. F6 to go to the rack. I'm going to reset my device. So again, right click on the device, reset device, clears it out. And so I'm going to take my thing there. And you you hear the artifacts in there, it's getting a little wobbly, wibbly wobbly weirdness because we're like on 3rd generation of it now. So because we had it, we stretched it, we bounced it, then we replaced it, then we bounced what we stretched to a Rex loop. So it's starting to get, you can only do that so many times before you lose your fidelity. But nevertheless, now we've got it as our loop here. It is in C minor, right? But you have this nifty loop transpose knob, and you can just transpose the whole loop if you like, and you can also transpose slices because you can click on a slice and transpose it up and down and stuff with the pitch button. But anyways, we're going to do the whole thing here. I've got it. I'm going to count. Let's see, we need to go to E minor. We're in C minor, so we're going to go 1 2 3 4. 1 2 3 4. Alrighty, let's see if that works now. And so you can hear those artifacts, they're getting pretty strong. And now if you start removing pieces, you can, one way you can try to fix some of this is before you bounce it, when you're at this stage, then you can remove all of these little sections and segments and segmentation. And sometimes that can make it better, sometimes it can make it worse. It's sort of trial and error, and it depends on the type of sample, depends on how much you've sped it up, slowed it down. There's quite a few variables. Reason does have a really good time stretch built into it. In my opinion, one of the best that I've ever heard, but it has limitations. And like I said, we're on the 3rd generation here. So once you've got it in Octo Rex, it is. And you can also automate this loop transpose button. So, if you wanted to do the same thing we did before, where we played it in E minor, then when we got to the chorus, we played it in A minor, then all you got to do is mess with your loop transpose and create an automation lane there. And that's one more way to reach the same thing. So that was a lot. So there's a couple different ways you can get to the same goal. That's not all of them, believe it or not, but that's a good place to get you going if you've never looked at this stuff before. If you have any questions, please feel free to leave them below. I'll try to answer them whenever I can. And like and subscribe, you know how that stuff goes. And let me know if it worked for you, or there's something else you'd like to see me go into more in depth, and I will be happy to give it a try. Thanks for watching and listening. Cheers.